GameStop employees of Reddit. What are some of your horror stories? Story 1, former employee. 2, wonderful stories. 1, older lady brings in a bag. She looks like an addict and she wants to sell her Wii. I put my hand in the bag and it's soaking wet cat. She was furious I wouldn't take it. From that day forward, made every customer take all trades out of bags themselves too. My first store was long and I had a kid and mom in back. Mom wasn't paying attention at all. 8-year-old walking around, gets really quiet. Then mom rushes the kid out of the store, go back there. He took on the floor, watched the tape. Mom finds him squatting, lets him finish, then takes him out. This was 2007 or so. GameStop had a used game return policy. 7 days, no questions asked, full refund. People would abuse this constantly, like a rental service. We knew it, and we were able to flag people who did it too often and decline them the returned manager policy, not company policy. Then there was this one, old lady, gaggle of grandkids. Seemed so sweet, was very nice to us while in the store, asking for help, recommendations, etc. Bought them a PS2 and a freaking gigantic stack of games. Like had to be 20 to 25 at least. Her total came out over 400. I rang her out, handed her the multiple bags of stuff, and said to the kids something along the lines of, "Wow, you guys are lucky to have such a great grandma. This many games will last you months." The grandma chuckled and said, "Oh, they're only in town for the week. You guys have that 7-day return policy. They'll see you in 6 days. Story 2, also, when you get done alphabetizing the Wii games and notice your hands are covered in mystery sticky stuff from all of the filthy children handling the cases. That was pretty gross. Story 3 years ago, 2007-2008-ish. I trained a kid that turned around and robbed the store at gunpoint a month after we fired him for stealing. He and his buddies left without shooting anyone. My coworker was on the phone with the cops after he left while I was getting his old employee file out. Reading off his 2 addresses, he had down parents and grandparents, phone number, etc. He's still serving time as the gun they used was apparently used in another homicide. Edit holy. Long-time lurker, only started posting a few weeks ago. Biggest response I've had. But to clarify a few questions I've received the last few hours, don't know who else was killed. I didn't find that out till after I had to go to court and testify. Even then, it wasn't something brought up to me personally. I found out when the verdict was reached, and it was brought up this happened in Jacksonville, Florida. I've been looking for the article about it, but it's not hard to believe a gun with a body on it pops up. It's one of those cities with the highest unsolved murder rates. And yeah, I was surprised about it. He seemed like a good kid, halfway through his senior year, good grades, and no, not with GameStop anymore. After this incident, LP came to town and started cleaning house. The GM quit, AGM was fired, and I, the SJ, right under the AGM, was acting manager for a couple months without any raise in pay. I was told I wasn't getting promotion, but I would have to train the new managers coming in. I quit without a 2 weeks notice update. 2-1 article I found about it. The kid in question was one of the 20-year-olds. Story 4, I used to be the ASM of a GameStop, but nothing really out of the ordinary happened there, just a lot of lingerers. When I was the manager of a local game store, though, there was definitely a lot of wild stories. The one that sticks out the most is this old dude we called Psycho Sexy who would come in every Monday morning, try to sell me, or whoever was working bootleg DVDs. He would tell us they were good for busting fat nuts too, and that he'd sell them to us super cheap. Every Monday, he'd come in, open up his duffel bag of bootleg, get refused, then leave, and come back the following Monday. This went on for almost 3 years. Story 5, never was an employee, but on the night Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, I was waiting in line, and this kid rode up in the parking lot and started bragging about how he got the first copy and held his copy out the window. After about 10 to 15 seconds of bragging and holding it outside the window, another kid ran up from behind the car, yanked the copy from his hand, and ran into the woods behind the GameStop. They never found the kid who took it, and the kid in the car started crying immediately. Story 6, former GS employee here. Worked in a store on the edge of a super sketchy part of Akron, Ohio. Back in the PS2 era, a guy brought in a box of trades. There were 3 games: Leisure Suit Larry, The Mansion. The guy gamed the rest of the box was nothing, but on VHS he was politely asked to leave. He asked us why. My coworker's response had me keeling over, because there's all over your... He left. Edit, thank you for my first silver. Postscript, my wife reminded me that this was also the store where we were robbed at gunpoint by 2 teenagers. But I still think the box of VHS is my top horror story. Love my 5 years at GameStop. Worked at GS a long time ago, but I'll never forget this one. One night a guy brought in a really dusty and dirty GameCube wanting cash, of course. I asked him if it worked, and he said he didn't know because he hadn't played in a long time. I told him that we have to check every console, and when I turned it on and opened the lip, about 100 roaches came running out all over the counter. Story 7, I got scolded by management for helping a woman for 30 minutes. She bought 12 games and was looking for good recommendations for her son who was on the spectrum. I found every game on her list and a few more to surprise him. Those surprise games were Okami and Katamari Damacy. She was overjoyed that her son was going to have lots of good games to play. Why were they mad over such a large sale? Oh, because they weren't used. That store, that woman wanted to make sure her son was happy, and I was tasked to do so. I know I did a good job, and you guys can close shop. Edit, I probably won't be able to reply to everyone. Thanks for all the positive comments. One time a woman screamed at me because her kid was tearing open a toy before paying for it, and I kindly told him to wait a little bit. She seemed on the fence on whether she wanted to buy the toy or not for her kid, so, I wasn't glad that her kid was already ripping it open. She then proceeded to scream at me for being really awful with kids, a horrible person, bad at my job, etc. Also, she wanted to complain to the manager if I ever talked to her kid like that again. She then angrily paid and walked to the store. Also, people tinkering, modding their console, and then trying to return it because it doesn't work anymore, and angrily insisting on having it bought that way in GameStop. Story 8, I worked at GameStop as an ASM and SM for 4-ish years. I have so many stories of creepy, scary, and rude customers. Some highlights: I once got asked out on a date at the register. I'm young and naive and awkward, and I kind of stop in my tracks and tell him that I'm working and I can't answer that. I work another 4 hours or so and close by myself, and he was waiting in the parking lot for me to leave. I had a family that would bring their son in every Saturday. They explained to me that he had severe autism and he was nonverbal. No problem, except they would stand in a corner and text or whatever while head knock over stands, rip things from walls, and even run behind the counter and try to bite you. I had to get permission to ban them from the store, but I was tired of trying to not get bit. Edit, for some clarification, just because a customer was awkward does not mean to me that they were creepy. This guy was a special case, hence why I wrote about it. I met friends I will always love when they were customers. I met people I worked with in the gaming industry in other capacities. I met my ex, etc. I am about to get my degree to specifically work and study children with disabilities. I have no problem being kind and patient with anyone, including children, but I don't want to be bit by a kid that I have no way to protect myself or my employees from. If y'all could stop sending me hate mail about being a nervous 19-year-old kid with a 40-year-old man leaning on her car at night, that would be awesome. Also, the other people's stories about seeing disgusting stuff is true. I saw more on PS Vitas, and I want to admit, I found drugs in game cases, and mostly I just saw a ton of systems filled with cockroaches. Day in a life, I guess. Story 9 had a couple come in to return a Sesame Street video game and a controller. They had a receipt from over a year ago. The game was scratched too, and the controller was full of dried soda. They said it didn't work anymore, shocker, and were furious when I wouldn't give them their money back. Like standing there screaming at me. I was the manager, so I had no one else there to back me up. It was crazy. Their kid was bawling, the lady was swearing like a syphilitic sailor, and the husband couldn't finish a sentence. Pretty sure they were both super high too, so that was fun. When the PS2 came out, I was assistant manager, and my manager would sell them out of the back room at a markup. Such a snake. I took the demo Xbox home with a copy of Halo before the system launched one night and had a 4-player all-night party. One of our other local stores had someone dig through the outside wall and steal everything out of their back room. Story 10, I worked in a store where theft was a very common occurrence. But this one dude, he nabbed one of the cheap controllers off the wall from the back of the store, puts it in his backpack. Then comes over to the counter, he reaches across the counter, opens a drawer, and steals a brand new game out of the drawer, takes it away from the register, opens it, waits in line, trades the game in for $25. Then he asked me to look for something in one of the bottom drawers, and he steals back the game he just traded in a second time. After that, he immediately left the store before I could notice he was gone. I gotta give him credit, he had some slick, so many other sketchy things too. But this one I just had a laugh at. Story 11, a gentleman comes in to buy one of our old 360 bundles used, the old system that required the HD. He brings it back a few days later and complains that it doesn't work. We start our normal troubleshooting methods in store. We couldn't figure anything out. So I do a swap, take his old system in as defective, then sell him a replacement bundle. I go through and try to wipe the system so we can ship it back to the warehouse. Cockroaches start crawling out of the system instead. I freak out, throw the system in one of our giant shopping bags, throw that in a box, tape it shut, and throw that in another bag. My manager tells me to just shrink it out, meaning we take the loss and destroy it in the back. I take it out to the parking lot and have to throw it around to destroy it. These cockroaches freaking scatter like marbles on a floor and dancing around the parking lot on my tiptoes to avoid the flood. It was awful. Second story, one of my regulars was a skunk farmer. I will say no more. ETA, okay, skunk farmer. I worked at a store that bordered 2 states. In State A, where the store was located, we were in a nicer area. We were extremely close to State B's rural community. State B had its own store an hour away from ours. but we were only 15 minutes from the state line. It was easier for State B residents to come to us rather than go to their own store. Mr. Skunk Farmer raised skunks. I don't know why or how, but every time I see him about twice a month, he'd show me some photos of the babies or of their new pens or of whatever shenanigans he was trying on the farm. I remember he wore overalls that he had his wife embroider a skunk onto the front pocket or something. I worked at GameStop for 5 years. We all have seen some strange things, I promise y'all that. Story 12, I had a guy call me a terrorist. I am Middle Eastern. We had to buy 2 get 1 free sale on pre-owned games. He wanted to buy the 2 cheaper games and get the expensive 1 free. When informed that's not how it works, he flipped out. We had to call security in the mall we were in to give him to leave. He called corporate ad corporate, told us he was documented, so any negative reviews on the next few weeks would be flagged. My manager stood up for me that day. I missed that guy. We also had a fire break out in the back room. Got rid of a lot of old inventory. Happened on Halloween. We were closed for a few days to clean and stuff. I used a fire extinguisher that day. First time ever. Story 13, I was hired to help open a new store. A store where the manager was male, and everyone he hired, female. He was definitely trying to cultivate a hot GameStop kind of situation. Word got around, and we had people coming in to visit ours when they had other stores much closer to where they lived. They didn't really buy anything. They kind of just lurked around for hours at a time, chatting the staff up. There were days when they'd wait for us to close up. That was kind of scary. I was eventually let go for not being friendly enough, which was apparently about 3 months before the manager had a total screaming meltdown during store hours, declared himself High Archangel, threw some at a customer, and was later picked up by an ambulance. So, I guess my horror story is the whole job. Story 14, I once had a lady and her teenage son come in to trade in several DVDs and games they had just stolen from the Walmart behind the strip mall, where our store was. Walmart employee calls me to ask if they're in my store and says the cops are on the way, so stall. Well, do what you can to keep them there. I said sure. I told them the cash versus store credit value of their items without mentioning that I can't even take them because they're still wrapped in the cellophane. I walk them around the store and talk about which games are the best value for the money, etc. The cops show up and ask them to step outside, and I just smile and go back behind the counter. They followed the police out, and one officer comes back a minute later to get the merchandise. Last I heard about it. Not a horror story, but definitely weird. Then there was this wealthy couple who had 3 kids, and each kid had a Wii, a PS3, and an Xbox 360. They would pre-order every major game that came out for each system, always the deluxe edition. They spent a ton of money in our store, and they were crazy. So abusive to every employee. They cussed at us and called us stupid. They would ask for things they knew they couldn't have, and then throw a fit. They would scour their receipts for anything that could be a mistake and make you explain it to them over and over. I went to work at a different company, and they came into my store there and got in line for my favorite cashier. I immediately called a manager over when it was their turn to check out, explained how I knew then, and that there was a 99 chance they would make the cashier cry. He went over, and just as he got there, they were beginning to raise their voices about some supposed mistake. Luckily, that manager is super good at handling people and got them out without letting them get a word in edgewise. I practically had PTSD from dealing with them. I think they got off on abusing people together. They would sometimes be laughing as they did it. If they found a legitimate mistake in anything, their faces would just light up. Truly evil people. Story 15, I was an ASM for about a year. Had done retail before. Our store was right in between a fairly upscale touristy part of town, as well as some of the poorer neighborhoods. So we got all sorts of people. They'll tell one horror story and then one uplifting story. The holiday season was in full swing, and we were always crowded. This particular day, we had a few seasonal hires in to help with the workload, and I was behind the counter pulling games as people came up to make the transactions faster. Then suddenly a smell hit the entire building like 100 cats had peed in the air conditioner, and someone had tried to get it dry by stoking a fire with burning hair. My seasonals looked at me with a mix of confusion and terror as a family of 4 approached the counter, and it slowly became apparent that they were the cause of the smell. I've been nose blind before from staying with an aunt who used to be an animal hoarder, but this was far worse. I set my seasonals on break, grabbed a hand sanitizer, pumped a small mountain of it into my hands, and as casually as possible smeared on my upper lip, hoping my facial hair would hold onto it and block the smell. It mostly worked. I was already in holiday rush mode, but this was the fastest I ever got a used Xbox 360 and GTA 5 packaged and ready to go. When they left, we noticed that the store had actually cleared out of all other customers who also couldn't deal with the odor. My SM came out of the back, gave me props for not embarrassing them, and promptly proceeded to fill our store with Febreze. Okay, one uplifting story. I know it's not what you asked for, but you're not the one making this post, so yay. We had our regular customers, and over time we would get to recognize a few people and have a general sense of what their interests were, beyond just being salespeople and trying to pitch whatever was hot and new. Frequently, we would also get people who knew they had 7 days or however long to trade a game back in for the full amount they paid for, and would use us as a general rental service that way. We were supposed to flag their account somehow to stop this from happening, but it wasn't common enough at our location to really care. We weren't losing money, and it was better than them stealing from us. One sort of grungy guy missing a couple of teeth would come in regularly, and he had a few different criteria. He owned a regular DS. He didn't have much money, and he wanted the games to be very long so they could occupy his time, usually RPGs, but they had to have a good story. He'd bring it back if it wasn't engaging and ask for something else. The first couple of times he did this, I thought maybe he was trying to put one over on us, but the games he was picking actually were too long to reasonably finish in the time he would have them. I guess I could have checked the save files, but it wasn't that big of a deal. He disappears for a couple of weeks, and then one day I'm working and I get a call. It's him. It's not too busy. So we chat for a few minutes. He basically wants to pick my brain about what we've got that's less than 10 that will last for a month, and if it's worth his time to come get it, because his money is so tight that just driving to our store and not finding something will be sort of significant loss. This happens to be during a week where Dragon Quest IX is on sale for less than $10, and we have one copy left, so I set it aside and tell him to try it out. My wife isn't a big JRPG fan, but she tried it, and it held her interest for quite a while, so maybe this guy will like it too. He comes by, gets it, thanks me, and leaves. I don't see him for months. He's one of those regulars who you get to thinking about, whether or not you would really say you were acquainted, but just that general I hope they're okay sort of thing. Then one day, he comes back and wearing a full suit, grinning ear to ear. I recognize him right away and ask how things are going. He tells me they turn around and he got a job as a cook at a Sonic within walking distance from his house, and have been able to save his money for a while, thanks to Dragon Quest being so long. And he wanted to say thanks and to buy his mom a PS3. He knew the only games she really recognized were classics, so we picked out one of the new Pac-Man games in Namco Museum. He was looking at the price tags of a couple of other ones, and I could tell he was doing some quick mental math. So I told him, pick the ones you're looking at, and we'll see what we can make work. He gets one more game for his mom and brings them up to the front. It's been a few years since, so I honestly don't remember what, if any, promotions we had going on at the time. But wouldn't you know it, he got enough of a discount for some mysterious reason that he was able to afford everything. Story 16, I was an assistant manager when one of the Madden games came out, 04. Maybe we were doing a big midnight opening for it, and everybody was having a great time waiting for the game, which we were picking up from another store about 30 miles away. Around 1100, after people had been waiting for 2 hours after the mall closed, I got a phone call. The game wasn't coming. I almost broke down sitting behind the register, dreading the thought of telling everybody that they just wasted their time. To make matters worse, another store within walking distance of us got their games. I just wanted to die that night. I am so grateful that our customers took it well and didn't get too angry. Story 17, not a horror story, but it always makes me laugh when I think about it. I worked at a big box store similar to Best Buy when the Wii U first came out. After months of Wii U's being impossible to find, we finally had some stock in. I was helping another customer on a busy day when a guy stopped me to ask the price on the Wii U. Customer, how much is the Wii U console? Me, it's 400 CAD plus tax. Customer, yeah, that's too much money. Can you do any better on the price? Me, yeah, for sure. For you, I can give it to you for $399.99. Customer, that's much better. It'll take two. Story 18, worked part-time at GameStop while I was in college. The best story I love to tell is the mom and son story. 40-ish mom and 7-10-ish boy come into the store in a large strip mall with lots of stores. Don't even look at merchandise. Come up to the counter and ask to let the kid use the bathroom. Clarified she's not there to buy anything, but has spent thousands of dollars in our store previously. We politely tell her we can't let customers use our bathroom because it's in the back of the store with lots of high-priced merchandise. That's the policy. We have cameras and corporate reviews the footage. Another story I have where I was wrongfully terminated substantiates that one. Additionally, what we don't tell her is that all the used game consoles that people sell back to us were stored in the bathroom. There was 1 month prior to Christmas. I had to do some impressive yoga to get to the toilet. I'm sure those consoles were hazmat, but I digress. But, not to be unsympathetic to this kid's plight, we tell the mom that the pizza place next door lets people use their bathroom if they buy something, and the cheapest thing is a 1 soda bottle of water. She starts flipping out on us and spewing expletives, telling us she's paid our salaries 10 times over, and that we're going to yada yada yada. Then, no joke, tells her son to just go. Kid actually unzips and pees all over the carpet in front of my register. Then they left. I've never been so grossed out and dumbfounded. Had to close up for the day, and half the next day while GameStop paid to have our carpet sanitized. resulted in a loss of pay for the weekend. Wonder what happened to that kid. He's got to be in his 20s by now. TLDR mom let her fully potty-trained son urinate on the carpet in front of the registers when we didn't allow him to use the employee bathroom in our store when there was a perfectly good bathroom for him to use in the pizza restaurant next door. Story 19, I got two stories. Quick one is a guy who would come in all the time to ask about by obscure Vita dating sims and asking inappropriate questions like if the next Dragon Age at this time would have been Inquisition was going to finally have scenes in it. Next one is New Year's Day. Miserable and working already. It's super early and first customer of the day of the whole year is this like 7-foot tall guy who comes in asking for AV cables for a PS4 cause the one he just bought didn't have one. We immediately tell him the PS4 only uses HDMI, and so it wouldn't have AV cables. Even confirming with him you mean those red, yellow, and white cables, he start getting mad and asks again for the cables, which we again tell him don't exist. Maybe there's an adapter or something, but I've never seen one, and we don't have them here regardless. Maybe check Best Buy. Guy immediately starts screaming, "You racist, get me this cable. I'm homeless, I just bought this thing for my grandkids. You're all racist, white devil." Thankfully, I froze in fear and confusion, and my boss took over and just scooted the guy out the door of a way to start the year. I worked in EB Games in 2005. The important thing to note is that EB didn't use the term used for games, but instead used pre-played. I had a woman come in to buy Sniper Elite for her husband, but I didn't have any more sealed copies, just the gutted display boxes. She doesn't mind this and purchased it at the new game price. A few hours later, I get an angry phone call from a man who says I sold his wife a used game and charged her for a new copy. He explains who she was, and I tell him what happened. He freaks out and says that the game was opened, which makes it used. I let him know that we don't sell used games, we sell pre-played games, and assure him that the disc was removed from the case, sleeved, and filed, which means it has never been played and is therefore a new copy. He gets loud, asks me how old I was 18, and goes off about how he is older than me and is a lawyer. He demands that he be refunded the difference between the prices, so I tell him that my store manager would be in the next morning, and he could take it up with her. To my knowledge, he never called her, so I think he just gave up. Story 29, employee, but I was waiting in line to buy a game, and a guy came in with his 8-ish-year-old child I assumed was his son, and pointed the kid to the Nintendo section as he went over to PlayStation. I was daydreaming, off in my own world, and it took me a second to realize a moment later that I was hearing water splashing. I turn around to see the kid projectile vomiting all over the floor, and the Nintendo games, the employee at the counter, the lady in front of me, and I all just watch this child empty his guts onto the floor before the father comes up to the son. "You okay, bud? Yeah, all right, let's get out of here." And without a word or even looking at anyone else, the two leave the store. Once gone, the three of us exchange wild looks, and the employee tells us it's his first day running the store on his own, and he doesn't have any cleaning supplies or know what to do. Poor guy. Parents, please don't let your kids throw up in GameStop. Story 21, I worked for Simply Mac, a company owned by GameStop. Simply Mac offered 2-hour classes for old people on Apple software like iMovie. We worked on commission 75 hours, and we didn't get commission for doing classes, so nobody wanted to do them. The older customers were kind of racist. So, as the only 18 years old white employee, I was forced to be the designated teacher. So this 60-year-old photographer comes in and wants to learn how to make an iMovie with his photo shoots. Awesome. There goes 2 hours. We're looking at photos to import from his laptop for the movie, and he has me click on this folder. And as I import it, hundreds of images of women on dirty mattresses in a basement pop up on the screen. He starts talking in this pervy voice about how pretty and beautiful each girl was in the shot. His laptop screen is facing the entire store, so anyone could just walk by and see. So I taught him how to use iMovie and make a slideshow with his, and at the end of the 2 hours, he tipped me $50, and I never saw him again. That was the most money I made in 2 hours there, ever. Story 22 today, a customer brings in probably the grossest PlayStation 4 I've ever seen. I think, oh no, please don't have roaches. I hold it on end and tap it against the floor and nothing falls out, nor is there an rustling of things moving. No telltale signs. I take it in. My coworker decides he needs to find out why it is so dirty before cleaning it, and opens it up. Inside is the world's first deluxe roach hotel. Managed to keep the hoard contained in the box the console was going in. That console is gone now. Why are people gross? Story 23 worked there years ago during 2006 to 2009-ish. An adult guy came and traded in a bunch of GameCube and PS2 games. One of them was a Mary-Kate and Ashley game. The cases were clean, but we always wiped them down. When my coworker got to the MKA game, I guess the Windex caused some sort of reaction because something came back to life and smeared all over the case. We threw the case away, LOL. Another guy would come in and only buy Leisure Suit Larry games and the Dead or Alive volleyball games. We used to play the console testing TV from the back room, LOL. It was a fun job, but some of the regulars, I have a lot more LOL. Story 24, I used to work for EB Games GameStop in Canada, and worst horror story was probably getting hired 6 hours a week for a year and a half. Edit, holy upvote. Let me add a bit more details. My shift would often get canceled since no one would shop at the store anymore. Funny enough, that location isn't there anymore. Story 25, not an employee, but I was at GameStop in a not-so-great area a while back, and there was a Spanish Karen. They're losing her. Apparently, she wanted to return COD Black Ops 3 because it was too violent for her little kid, but since you can't return brand-new open video games, they wouldn't give her the money back. She was yelling and screaming at them to take it back, this and that. The insane part is she said that she would be returned with backup and all this. She was literally threatening violence while saying she's against it in the game. Karen logic transcends language and culture. Story 26, not a GameStop employee, but I worked at a Subway that was in the same parking lot as the GameStop. After working at that Subway, I became friends with some of the managers at that GameStop. I would give them free food. They would give me discounts on games. Anyways, one day one of the managers comes in after his shift, and I asked him how his day went. He said that it went fine until the last few hours of his shift. Apparently some guy came in asking to return a game that he got from a different game store, not GameStop, and asked for a full refund. When a manager said that the guy couldn't return it because it was from a different store, the guy went apeshit and started yelling and destroying stuff in the store. Then the man pulled out a knife and started going to town on a cardboard cutout. After doing that, the dude left without saying anything to anyone. Manager says that the dude was probably high drunk when it happened. Story 27, roach filled systems. Once someone bought a GameCube and brought it back because the heat caused the eggs to hatch. Had someone try to trade in a roachy PS3. Still had roaches in my store even though I turned it away. And harassment from male customers in general. My first job was at GameStop, early 2000s. I stayed for about 4 years from when I was 17 to 21, started as a part-timer and ended up as a shift supervisor. Then boyfriend, later husband, now ex-husband, was our store manager for a while. The point is I have seen some. My favorite one is a weekday afternoon, so we're slow and short-staffed. It's just the two of us, my boyfriend and I, and maybe a customer or two. Someone is playing the Guitar Hero demo. Someone is browsing the wall. The door jingles, and in walks a guy with a huge backpack. I give the customary greeting, hey, welcome in. Let us know if you need anything, and he doesn't acknowledge or respond. I shrug to my boyfriend, go back to cleaning discs or stripping cases or whatever. The guy looks around for a few minutes, and we think nothing of it. Finally, he comes up to my boyfriend and gestures for the stack of post-its he's using to label games we're putting in the disc buffing machine. Boyfriend obliges. Guy says nothing, just writes on the post-it. He puts it on the counter in full view of both of us. And in all capital letters is the following message: I have gun. Give money, boyfriend. And I turn sheet white and realize we're being robbed, and this guy has a gun in his giant backpack. We are teenagers with no manager and no silent alarm under the desk, and we are terrified. The guy is already putting down the backpack and unzipping it. The other customers are totally unaware and off doing their own thing, and we're going to get murdered in a GameStop at 1:00 p.m. on a Tuesday over the $100 we have in our tiny till and a safe neither of us have the combo for. He reaches in the backpack and withdraws a light gun for a Sega Dreamcast. Turns out this guy is deaf and wants to sell us a light gun. TLDR, a deaf guy came in to sell us a toy gun and decided the best way to communicate that was to write on a post-it that he had a gun and wanted money.